Before we dive into this story, please be advised that it explores themes of psychological distress, identity confusion, and unsettling mysteries. It started subtly, a flicker at the edge of my vision, a whisper in the quiet hum of my everyday life. Nothing I could quite grasp, just a fleeting sense of unease, like a shadow passing over a sunny day. I'm David Miller, an ordinary guy from suburban Ohio. I have a decent job as a software engineer, a cozy house with a slightly overgrown lawn, and a comfortable, predictable routine. My biggest worry used to be whether the Buckeyes would win their next game, or if I'd remember to pick up almond milk on my way home. Life was good, if a little unremarkable. Then the memories began. The first one hit me hard, not in a dream but wide awake, stirring my coffee one Tuesday morning. One moment I was watching the steam curl from my mug, the next I was somewhere else entirely. The air was thick and cold, smelling of damp earth and something metallic, something vaguely antiseptic. I was looking down at a floor, not the polished hardwood of my kitchen, but rough, uneven concrete, stained with what looked suspiciously like dried rust. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in my ears. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool morning air. A low guttural sound echoed from somewhere nearby, a sound that made every muscle in my body tense. A sound I knew with absolute certainty I had never heard before in my life. And then just as quickly as it began, it was gone. I was back in my kitchen, coffee cooling, spoon clattering against the mug. My hands were shaking. I tried to dismiss it, of course. Stress, I told myself. Too much screen time, maybe a weird brain hiccup. I'd had vivid dreams before, but never anything that felt so utterly real, so intrusive in broad daylight. I went to work, tried to focus on lines of code, but the image of that grimy concrete floor, the smell, the phantom chill, they clung to me. It was like a splinter under the skin, nagging and persistent. The next time it was more intense. I was at the grocery store, debating between organic and conventional apples. The mundane task was a stark contrast to the sudden, overwhelming sensation of being trapped in a small windowless room. The walls were rough stone, slick with condensation. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, casting long dancing shadows. I could hear muffled voices, urgent and hushed, just beyond a heavy wooden door. My stomach clenched with a primal fear, a terror so profound it stole my breath. I instinctively pressed myself against the cold stone, trying to disappear, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. I wasn't just seeing this, I was feeling it. The cold, the fear, the desperate need to be silent. Then, a sharp, sudden crack like a branch snapping shattered the illusion, and I was back in the produce aisle, clutching a bruised gala apple, staring blankly at a bewildered Jessica, a woman I vaguely recognized from my office building, who was now giving me a wide berth. I mumbled an apology, my face burning, and practically ran from the store. This wasn't stress. This wasn't a dream. These were memories. But they weren't my memories. I had never seen a stone room like that. Never smelled that metallic scent. Never felt that bone-deep terror. My life had been safe, uneventful. I had no hidden past, no amnesia, no traumatic childhood events that could explain these vivid, terrifying flashes. I spent the next few days in a haze of confusion and mounting dread. I went to my doctor, Michael, a kind older man who listened patiently as I stumbled through my increasingly bizarre symptoms. He ran a battery of tests, blood work, and MRI, all of which came back perfectly normal. "David," he'd said, looking at me with concern, "your brain looks like a textbook example of healthy gray matter. Sometimes stress manifests in strange ways. Perhaps a therapist." I nodded, thanked him, but deep down I knew it wasn't stress. It was something else. Something far more unsettling. The memories became more frequent, more detailed, more insistent. They weren't sequential but fragments, shards of a life that wasn't mine. I saw a woman's face, pale and drawn, her eyes wide with fear, framed by dark, tangled hair. I saw a pair of hands, strong and calloused, struggling with a heavy iron latch. I heard a distant scream cut short, followed by an unnerving silence. Each fragment brought with it a wave of emotions that weren't my own. An overwhelming sense of loss, a burning injustice, a chilling premonition of danger. They were so visceral, so real that my own life began to feel like the dream. My comfortable house, my predictable job, my mundane routines. They all started to blur, to feel less substantial than the grim, terrifying reality unfolding in my mind. I started to withdraw. Friends called, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. How do you explain to someone that you're experiencing someone else's nightmares? How do you tell them you're starting to believe you might be losing your mind? My girlfriend, Emily, noticed the change. She tried to be understanding, but the distant, haunted look in my eyes, the way I'd flinch at sudden noises, the way I'd sometimes stare blankly into space, made her increasingly worried. "David, you're not yourself," she pleaded one evening, her voice laced with concern. "Please talk to me. What's going on?" I wanted to tell her, but the words felt too insane to utter. How could I explain that I was haunted by a past that didn't belong to me? One evening, while trying to distract myself by watching an old documentary, a familiar image flashed on the screen. A grainy photograph of a forgotten historical building, a derelict, isolated structure in a remote part of the country. My breath hitched. It was the stone building from my memory. The rough, uneven walls, the single heavy wooden door, even the faint, almost imperceptible crack above the lintel. It was all there. My heart pounded not just with fear, but with a terrifying jolt of recognition. This wasn't just my imagination. This place, this memory was real, and it was out there somewhere. The memory wasn't just a figment of my fractured mind. It was a window into a horrifying reality I never knew existed, a reality that was now bleeding into my own, and I had no idea why. The world, which had moments before been a familiar tapestry of predictable routines and comforting certainties, now felt like a fragile illusion, ready to shatter at any second. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of my apartment. The air tasted metallic like the table in the memory. Every shadow seemed to deepen. Every mundane object in my living room seemed to hold a sinister secret. It wasn't just a memory. It was a scar on reality, and I was somehow tethered to it. I paced, a caged animal in my own home. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation, a way to shove this terrifying revelation back into the realm of dreams. But I couldn't. The details were too sharp, too precise, too real. The faint, coppery tang in the air, the chill that seeped from the stone walls, the way the symbols seemed to pulse with a dark energy of their own. These weren't figments of imagination. They were sensory data, imprinted on my consciousness as if I had lived them, breathed them, felt them. Sleep was a forgotten luxury. The memory played on an endless loop behind my eyelids. The flickering bulb, the grotesque symbols etched into the stone, the gleaming surgical table, cold and stark in the center of the room, and the profound, suffocating sense of wrongness that permeated every inch of that space. What happened there? Who was involved? And why, for the love of everything sane, was it now my memory? I knew with a horrifying certainty that I couldn't just ignore this. It was a poison seeping into my life, and I had to find the source. But where do you even begin to search for a hidden room from a memory that isn't yours? I started, as most people do in the modern age, with the internet. Days blurred into a relentless cycle of searching, fueled by coffee and a gnawing dread. I typed every keyword I could think of: unusual symbols, ancient, abandoned basements, strange rituals, hidden rooms, metallic tables, coppery smell, old buildings. The results were a dizzying rabbit hole of urban legends, conspiracy theories, architectural forums, and historical societies. Most of it was useless. A lot of it was disturbing. None of it felt right. I tried to recreate the symbols I'd seen. In my mind, they were abstract yet intricate. Not quite like any language I knew, nor any readily identifiable occult script. They had a geometric precision, but also an organic, flowing quality, like veins or roots. I sketched them roughly on a notepad, trying to capture their unsettling essence. One resembled a stylized eye, elongated and tear-shaped, with 3 lines radiating from its pupil. Another was a series of interlocking triangles, forming a complex, almost 3-dimensional pattern. The third, the most prominent one above the table, looked like a skeletal hand reaching upwards, its fingers ending in sharp, almost claw-like points. I searched for these specific designs. Nothing. It was like I was looking for a ghost in a library full of facts. The sheer frustration was maddening, but beneath it, a cold resolve was hardening. This wasn't going to be easy, but I had to know. The memory wasn't static. It evolved, or rather, I began to notice new details within its terrifying framework. I remembered the faint sound of dripping water, echoing from somewhere unseen. The air wasn't just cold, it was damp, carrying the scent of earth and something else. Something chemical like old formaldehyde mixed with rust. And the metallic table itself. It wasn't just a simple slab. It had straps, thin leather restraints worn in dark at the wrists and ankles. My stomach lurched. The implications of those straps were a punch to the gut. This wasn't just a hidden room. It was a place where someone had been held, a place of unspeakable acts. The memory, which had started as a strange intrusion, was rapidly transforming into a crime scene, a chilling tableau of past horrors. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Asterisk, this wasn't just a memory of a place. It was a memory of an event. Asterisk, and I was seeing it through someone else's eyes, someone who was perhaps on that table. The thought sent a shiver of ice through my veins, burrowing deep into my bones. Was I seeing the last moments of a victim? Was this a death memory? And if so, why was it in my head? I started looking for news archives, cold cases, disappearances in the region. I searched for unexplained disappearances rural, abandoned properties strange findings, cult activity New England. I focused on the areas surrounding my hometown, then expanded outward, tracing a widening circle on a digital map. I knew nothing about the specific location, but the architecture and the memory, the rough-hewn stone, the heavy wooden door, the overall sense of isolation, suggested an older, perhaps rural structure. One night, deep into another frantic search session, I stumbled upon a forgotten forum post from a decade ago. It was an obscure thread on an urban exploration site, titled Whispers from the Old Mill. The poster, an anonymous user named Shadowseeker, described an abandoned textile mill on the outskirts of an old industrial town called Blackwood Creek, about 2 hours north of where I lived. The post detailed strange occurrences, unexplained noises, a pervasive metallic smell, and odd symbols painted on the lowest level, deep within the foundations. My breath hitched. Asterisk, metallic smell, odd symbols, lowest level, foundations. Asterisk. It was a long shot, a needle in a haystack of digital detritus, but it was the first thing that had resonated with any part of the memory. Blackwood Creek. I pulled up Google Maps, searching for the old mill. The satellite image showed a sprawling, dilapidated complex, mostly overgrown, nestled beside a dark, winding river. It looked like a forgotten relic, a skeleton of industry slowly being reclaimed by nature. And within the complex, nestled slightly apart from the main buildings, was a smaller, older stone structure, almost completely swallowed by dense woods. It looked isolated, secluded, perfect for hiding something. A new wave of fear, colder and sharper than before, washed over me. This wasn't just abstract research anymore. This was a location, a real place that might hold the key to the nightmare bleeding into my mind. I couldn't tell anyone. Not Jessica, my girlfriend, who would likely think I was losing my mind. Not David, my best friend, who would try to logically talk me out of it or worse, make light of my terror. This was my burden, my terrifying secret, and I had to confront it alone. The thought was isolating but also strangely empowering. If this was real, if I was truly tied to it, then I was the only one who could unravel it. I spent the next few days devouring every piece of information I could find about Blackwood Creek and the old mill. It had a dark history, apparently. The mill had closed down abruptly after a series of unfortunate incidents, accidents, unexplained fires, and a few local disappearances that were never solved. Local folklore spoke of a cursed ground and shadows that lingered. Old newspaper clippings, digitized and barely legible, hinted at a general sense of unease, a town that felt like it was always holding its breath. One article from the 1970s mentioned a small cult that had briefly established itself in the area, drawn by the town's isolation and ancient energies. They had disbanded after a conflict with locals, their leader vanishing without a trace. Cults, ancient energies, unexplained disappearances. It was all starting to coalesce into a terrifying picture. The symbols on my notepad, the ones I'd sketched from the memory, suddenly seemed less abstract. I cross-referenced them with obscure texts on forgotten cults and fringe spiritual groups. Still no direct match, but the style, the blend of geometric precision and organic flow, the unsettling quality, started to feel eerily familiar to certain esoteric diagrams I found. They weren't common knowledge, these symbols. They were hidden, arcane. The urge to go to Blackwood Creek became an unbearable pressure. Every waking moment was consumed by it. I felt a pull, a magnetic force drawing me towards that abandoned mill. It was irrational, dangerous, probably insane, but I couldn't fight it. The memory wasn't just in my head. It was a compass pointing me towards a dark truth. I packed a small bag, a powerful flashlight, a first aid kit, a change of clothes, and a sturdy pair of boots. I told Jessica I was going on a solo hiking trip, needing to clear my head. She looked at me with concern, sensing the distance, the unspoken anxiety, but she didn't press. I felt a pang of guilt, but the truth was too monstrous to share. As I drove, the familiar landscape slowly gave way to denser forests, older towns, and roads less traveled. The sky grew heavy, mirroring the weight in my chest. The air grew colder, and a fine mist began to descend, clinging to the trees like spectral fingers. I reached the outskirts of Blackwood Creek as dusk began to fall. The town itself was desolate, few lights, fewer people. It felt like a place time had forgotten, a town holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I drove past the last gas station, its neon sign flickering erratically, and followed the winding road that led to the old mill. The further I went, the more the trees pressed in, their branches clawing at the sky. The road became a gravel track, then little more than a dirt path, overgrown with weeds. Finally, through a parting in the dense foliage, I saw it. The silhouette of the old mill, vast and crumbling, loomed against the twilight sky. It was even more desolate, more imposing than the satellite images suggested. A place utterly abandoned, yet humming with a strange, silent energy. I parked my car a good distance away, hidden amongst a cluster of pines, and started on foot. The air grew colder with every step, the metallic tang from my memory growing stronger, seeping into my real surroundings. The mist thickened, obscuring my vision, turning the skeletal trees into grotesque, shifting figures. I approached the smaller stone structure I'd seen on the map, the one nestled deep in the woods, slightly separate from the main mill complex. It was an old pumping station, according to the historical records I'd found, built even before the main mill. Its stone walls were thick with moss, its windows boarded up and rotting. A heavy rusted iron door, scarred and ancient, stood as the only entrance. My heart pounded, a frantic rhythm against the rising tide of dread. This was it. This felt right. Too right. The cold, the damp, the smell. It was all here. I reached out, my hand trembling, and pushed against the heavy iron door. It groaned, a mournful sound that echoed through the silent woods, but it held fast. Locked. Of course. I circled the small structure, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The foundations were partially exposed in places, revealing rough-hewn stone blocks, ancient and weathered. And then I saw it. Faint, almost swallowed by moss and time, etched into one of the larger foundation stones near the ground, was a symbol. It was the stylized eye, elongated and tear-shaped, with 3 lines radiating from its pupil. The symbol from my memory, the symbol I had sketched. My breath caught in my throat. It was real. This place was real. And the memory wasn't just a vision. It was a blueprint. I had found it. But then, as my flashlight beam lingered on the symbol, a glint of something else caught my eye. Barely visible beneath the moss, just below the etched symbol, was a small, almost imperceptible crack in the stone. And from that crack something was oozing. A dark, viscous liquid, almost black in the failing light, with a faint coppery sheen. It smelled metallic, and strangely familiar. It was the same smell from the memory, the same metallic tang that had haunted my dreams. It was here now in the real world, and it was seeping from the very foundations of this forgotten, terrifying place. I felt a primal scream building in my chest, threatening to burst free. This wasn't just a memory bleeding into my life. Something was bleeding out of this place into the world, and it was drawing me in. And I suddenly knew with chilling clarity that I wasn't just an observer anymore. I was part of it, and whatever was hidden inside this place, whatever had left those horrifying imprints on my mind, was still very much alive. The silence of the late afternoon pressed in, thick and suffocating. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the stillness. The house loomed, a dark maw against the bruised sky, its vacant windows like eyes staring back, daring me. I was part of it. The words echoed in my mind, a cold, undeniable truth. Whatever had happened here, whatever unspeakable thing had etched itself into my very consciousness, was waiting. And I inexplicably was meant to find it. A tremor ran through me, a primal fear that screamed at me to turn and run, to forget the visions, to dismiss the impossible. But another force, stronger and far more insidious, held me rooted. It was the same pull that had drawn me across states, the same magnetic current that had whispered promises of answers in my waking hours and haunted my dreams. The memory that wasn't mine, yet felt more real than my own life, was demanding resolution. I took a shaky breath, the air tasting of damp earth and decay. My eyes scanned the decaying facade, peeling paint, broken shutters, ivy clawing its way up the brickwork like skeletal fingers. It was exactly as I had seen it in those terrifying flashes, down to the chipped birdbath in the overgrown yard and the peculiar, twisted oak tree by the side entrance. Every detail a confirmation of the impossible. My feet moved before my conscious mind gave the order, crunching on dead leaves and twigs as I approached the rickety porch. The front door, a heavy dark wood, was firmly shut, but the paint was blistering, the brass knocker tarnished black. It looked impenetrable, defiant. I circled the house, my senses on high alert, every rustle of the leaves, every distant bird call, amplified into a potential threat. The back of the house was even more swallowed by nature. Overgrown bushes brushed against the windows, some of which were boarded up, others merely grimy and opaque. And then I saw it. A small, almost hidden door, tucked away beside what must have been an old mudroom or pantry. It was slightly ajar, just enough to reveal a sliver of darkness within. The wood was warped, the paint long gone, leaving it a ghostly gray. A shiver traced its way down my spine. An open door. An invitation. Or a trap. My hand trembled as I pushed it further. The sound was a low, mournful groan, the hinges protesting years of neglect. A wave of cold, stale air, thick with the scent of dust and something else, something vaguely metallic like old blood or rust, washed over me. I stepped inside, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The transition from the muted light of the overcast day to the oppressive gloom within was jarring. I fumbled for my phone, its flashlight beam a weak but welcome spear against the suffocating darkness. It illuminated a small, cluttered space. Old gardening tools lay scattered, their metal parts pitted with rust. Empty clay pots, some broken, were stacked haphazardly. Cobwebs, thick and heavy, draped everything like ancient shrouds. This wasn't a room from my memories. Not directly, but the feeling, the profound sense of abandonment, the chilling quiet, it was all too familiar. I moved cautiously, my footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust on the wooden floorboards. Each creak, each groan of the settling house made me jump. I passed through a narrow archway into what appeared to be a kitchen. It was a tableau frozen in time, yet utterly ravaged by neglect. A faded floral wallpaper peeled in strips, revealing the plaster beneath. The countertops were stained, the sink encrusted with grime. A single chipped ceramic plate sat on the counter, next to a rusted fork. It was as if someone had simply walked away mid-meal decades ago. But what truly caught my eye, what sent a fresh surge of dread through me, was the refrigerator. An old bulky appliance, its white paint yellowed and peeling. On its door, held by a magnet shaped like a smiling sun, was a child's drawing. It was simple, innocent. A stick figure family. A tall figure, a slightly shorter one, and two smaller ones, holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Scribbled beneath it in shaky, childish letters were the words, "Our happy home." My breath hitched. A family. 2 parents, 2 children. The familiar ache in my chest intensified. A phantom pain for people I didn't know. This was a family house. A home. And something terrible had happened here. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to touch the drawing, to feel the paper, to connect with the child who had drawn it. But just as I reached out, a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision made me freeze. It was nothing, just the way the flashlight beam caught dust motes dancing in the air. But for a split second I had felt a presence. A distinct, cold awareness that I was not alone. I spun around, sweeping the flashlight beam across the room. Empty. Just the silent, decaying kitchen. My heart pounded a frantic, desperate rhythm. My imagination, I told myself. The stress, the fear. But a prickle of unease persisted. A whisper at the edge of my hearing. I turned back to the drawing, my hand still hovering. The innocence of it, the heartbreaking optimism, felt like a cruel joke in this desolate place. I pulled out my phone again, snapping a quick photo, the flash briefly illuminating the entire room in a blinding white, making the shadows leap and recoil. As the light faded, I noticed something else on the refrigerator door, half hidden by the drawing. A calendar. An old yellowed calendar still hanging, open to a specific month. October. The year was faded, almost illegible, but I squinted, bringing the light closer. 1998. A cold wave washed over me. October 1998. The same year, the same season that my own memories, the ones that weren't mine, seemed to center around. The fragmented images of autumn leaves, a chill in the air, a specific kind of fading light. My gaze dropped to the calendar dates. Several days were circled in red, but one date, October 17th, was not circled. Instead, a large dark X was scrawled over it, so forcefully that it had torn the paper slightly. October 17th, 1998. My mind raced. What happened on that day? Was it the day they left? The day something terrible began? The day it ended? The air grew colder. I could feel it, a palpable drop in temperature, despite the stuffiness of the house. My breath plumed faintly in front of me. This wasn't just old house chill. This was something else. I pulled my jacket tighter, my eyes darting around the room, searching for the source of the cold, for any explanation. There was none. Just the oppressive silence, broken only by the frantic beat of my own heart. I moved away from the refrigerator, drawn by a hallway leading deeper into the house. The floorboards groaned beneath my weight, each step a loud intrusion. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper, a different pattern here, depicting quaint country scenes. But the cheerfulness of the design was utterly lost beneath the grime and the peeling edges. I found myself in what must have been the living room. It was larger, with a grand brick fireplace dominating one wall. A tattered couch, its springs broken and stuffing spilling out, sat against another. A coffee table, covered in a thick blanket of dust, held a stack of yellowed magazines from the late 90s. This was it. This was the room. A jolt went through me, sharp and undeniable. This was the room from my memory. The one where the shadows danced, where the muffled screams echoed. The layout was identical. The fireplace, the window overlooking the front yard. The exact angle of the sunlight that had pierced through the grime in my visions. My flashlight beam swept across the room and then stopped. On the mantelpiece, above the cold, empty grate of the fireplace, a single object stood out. It was a framed photograph turned face down. My hand reached for it, almost instinctively, my fingers brushing against the cold, dusty glass. I hesitated for a moment, a wave of nausea washing over me. This was it. This was the threshold. Whatever was in this photo, whatever truth it held, I knew it would irrevocably change everything. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was a crime scene, a memory vault, a place where a story had been violently interrupted. I slowly turned the frame over. It was a family portrait, the same family from the child's drawing. 2 adults, a man and a woman smiling brightly, and 2 children. A boy, perhaps 10 or 11, with a mischievous grin, and a younger girl, maybe 7 or 8, with long dark braids and eyes that sparkled with life. They looked happy, normal, a perfect American family, frozen in a moment of carefree joy. But as I stared at the girl, a cold dread began to coil in my stomach. Her face, her eyes, there was something about them, something I recognized, not from my memories of this house, but from another, far more recent and unsettling source. It was Michael, the boy in my recurring nightmare, the one who had watched me with such intense, desperate sadness. Wait, no, the boy in the photo was different. But the girl, her eyes, they were the same wide, dark, haunting eyes. My blood ran cold. The girl in the photograph, she was the same girl I saw in my nightmares. The girl who was always just out of reach, always just fading when I tried to grasp her. The girl who was at the center of the terror. But the details didn't quite match up with what I thought I knew. In my nightmares, it was a boy, Michael, who was prominent. Who was this girl? And why did I feel such a profound, sickening recognition? I brought the photo closer, squinting at the details. The clothes, the hairstyles, they screamed late 90s. The genuine smiles, the warmth of the setting sun behind them. It was a picture of pure, unadulterated happiness. And then I saw it. Tucked into the bottom corner of the frame, almost obscured by a smudge of dust, was a small handwritten inscription. Faded but still legible. The Millers. Summer 98. The Millers. My mind reeled. The Millers. That name. It felt like a key turning in a lock I didn't even know existed. But it didn't open a door to understanding. It opened a door to more questions, more terror. Because as I stared at the smiling faces of the Miller family, a new horrifying realization began to dawn on me. A realization that twisted my gut into knots and made the stale air catch in my throat. The girl in the photograph. She wasn't just in my nightmares. She was in the other memories. The ones that came to me in flashes, the ones I couldn't explain. The ones where I was her. The same dark braids. The same wide, haunted eyes. The same small, almost imperceptible scar just above her left eyebrow. It was undeniable. I was looking at a photograph of the girl whose memories I was somehow reliving, the girl whose life, or perhaps her ending, had become inextricably intertwined with my own. And then, just as that chilling truth settled in, a low guttural moan echoed from somewhere deep within the house. Not the creak of old wood, not the groan of hinges. This was a sound that was alive, a sound filled with pain and something else, something ancient and utterly malevolent. My flashlight beam shook violently in my hand. The air grew impossibly heavy, pressing down on me, stealing my breath. I wasn't alone. I had never been alone in this house. And whatever was here, whatever had made that sound, had just realized I had found the photo. It had just realized I was getting too close, and it was coming for me. The sound of something heavy scraping against the floorboards upstairs paralyzed me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden, suffocating silence. The photo, a fragile piece of the past, was clutched so tightly in my hand I thought I might crease it. My eyes darted around the dim living room, searching for a shadow, a movement, anything to confirm what my gut already screamed. I was not alone. The dragging sound came again, closer this time, accompanied by a faint rhythmic thump, thump thump. It wasn't the sound of footsteps. It was something else, something heavy being moved, or perhaps something being dragged. My breath hitched. I scrambled backward, tripping over my own feet, landing hard against the dusty armchair. The impact jarred me, but the pain was a distant hum against the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I pushed myself up, my gaze locked on the doorway leading to the stairs. The air grew colder, a bone-chilling draft that wasn't there a moment ago. I could feel it, a palpable presence descending. It wasn't a shadow or a whisper. It was a weight, an oppressive silence that pressed down on me, stealing my breath. This wasn't just an old house playing tricks. This was real. I had to move. I couldn't stay here. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my hand still gripped the photo. Felt like a tether, a key. I couldn't leave it. Not now. Not when I was so close. I spun around, ignoring the prickling sensation on the back of my neck, and bolted for the front door. My fingers fumbled with the old deadbolt, stiff and unyielding. The metallic clinking echoed too loudly in the silence. Asterisk click, click, click. Asterisk, the rhythmic thumping from the stairs grew louder, faster. It was reaching the bottom landing. Finally, with a desperate grunt, the bolt slid open. I yanked the door inward and burst out into the cool night air, gasping. I didn't stop to look back, didn't dare to. I ran across the overgrown lawn, past the rusted swing set, and didn't slow until I reached my car, parked haphazardly down the street. My hands trembled so violently I could barely insert the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, a comforting sound of escape. I put the car in reverse, tires spitting gravel, and sped away from the house, the silhouette of its gables fading into the darkness behind me. I drove for what felt like hours. The image of that dark doorway and the unseen presence burned into my mind. I finally pulled over at a roadside diner, the only place open for miles. The fluorescent lights inside were harsh, but they felt like a beacon of safety. I ordered a coffee, my voice still shaky, and sat in a booth trying to steady myself. My hand instinctively went to my pocket, confirming the photo was still there. I pulled it out, my fingers tracing its worn edges. Now, in the relative safety of the diner, I could finally examine it properly. It was an old photograph, sepia-toned, depicting a family. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, stood proudly at the back, his arm around a woman with kind, tired eyes. In front of them, two children, a boy and a girl, sat on a wooden bench. The boy, maybe 10 or 11, had a mischievous grin. But it was the girl who seized my attention. She was younger, perhaps 7 or 8, with long dark braids and a bright, almost luminous smile. And she was me. My breath hitched again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was a profound, disorienting shock. The face staring back at me from the faded photograph was undeniably my own. The same nose, the same curve of the lip, even the faint dimple on my left cheek when I smiled. But it couldn't be me. I had no memory of this family, this house, this life. My parents were Robert and Susan Miller, and I was their only child, born and raised in Portland, Oregon. This photo was taken decades ago, judging by the clothes and the style. I was in my late 20s. It was impossible. Yet there it was, a younger version of me, smiling alongside a family I'd never known. The man and woman in the photo were strangers, as was the boy. But the girl, that was my face. Flipping the photo over with trembling fingers, I found faded, handwritten script on the back. It was elegant, looping cursive, almost illegible in places. I squinted, deciphering the words. Asterisk summer of '74. Our beautiful family. David, Sarah, little Michael, and our precious Emily. Always together. Asterisk. Emily. My name was Alex. Not Emily. A cold dread, far more unsettling than the fear I'd felt in the house, began to spread through me. Emily. The name resonated with a strange, phantom familiarity, like a word on the tip of my tongue that I could never quite grasp. And the year? 1974. That was years before I was even born. This wasn't just a memory that wasn't mine. This was a life that wasn't mine. A past that seemed to claim me, pulling me into its depths. Who were David and Sarah? Who was Michael? And why did Emily look exactly like me? Was this some elaborate, cruel joke? Was I adopted, and my parents had hidden it from me? But even then, why a photo from 1974 of a family I didn't recognize? And the house from my recurring memory, the one I just fled in terror, was clearly the setting for this family portrait. I felt a sudden, desperate urge to call my parents, to demand answers. But a deeper, more chilling thought stopped me. What if they didn't know? What if this was something far more twisted than a hidden adoption? My parents had always been open, loving. The idea of them concealing something so fundamental, so shattering, felt wrong. I took a shaky sip of my coffee, the lukewarm liquid doing little to warm the ice spreading through my veins. I needed answers, real answers, not just fragmented memories and terrifying encounters. I needed to find out who Emily was, and who David, Sarah, and Michael were. The immediate threat from the house had subsided, but a new, more profound unease had taken its place. The memory that wasn't mine had just been given a name, a face, and a date. Emily, 1974. I pulled out my phone, my fingers still a little unsteady. I needed to start digging. Fast. I typed missing persons 1974 and family disappearance 1974 into the search bar, adding Maine, because something in the house, in the architecture, had felt distinctly New England. The small town where the house was located had a name. I remembered seeing it on a faded sign as I drove in. Oakhaven. Oakhaven, Maine, 1974. The search results loaded slowly, each pixel an agonizing crawl. My eyes scanned the headlines, looking for anything that matched. And then there it was. A local newspaper archive. A digitized scan of an old article from the Oakhaven Gazette. The headline screamed, "Oakhaven family vanishes without a trace." My heart leaped into my throat. I clicked on the link, my blood running cold as the article came into focus. The date, August 14, 1974. The article detailed the disappearance of the Peterson family, David Peterson, 42, his wife Sarah Peterson, 38, and their two children, Michael, 11, and Emily, 7. They had been reported missing from their home on Elmwood Lane, Oakhaven, Maine. The same house, the same names, the same ages. Emily, 7. A chill snaked down my spine, far colder than any draft in that abandoned house. This wasn't just a resemblance. This wasn't just a recurring dream. This was real. The family in the photo was the Peterson family, and they had vanished. The article continued, describing the police investigation. No signs of forced entry, no ransom note. Their car was still in the driveway. It was as if they had simply walked away, or been taken, without a struggle, without a trace. The case had gone cold within months, unsolved for decades. I reread the names. David, Sarah, Michael, Emily. My mind replayed the photo, the faces, the smiles. And then it hit me, a sickening lurch in my stomach. My memory, the one that wasn't mine. It always started the same way. The sound of laughter, a child's voice calling out, then a sudden profound silence. And the feeling of being alone. Alone in that house with a sense of dread, a lingering echo of something terrible. What if the memory wasn't just a memory of Emily? What if it was Emily's memory? Or what if it was my memory but I was Emily? The thought was so outlandish, so impossible, it made my head spin. But the evidence was staring me in the face. The photo, the name, the uncanny resemblance, the house, the date, the vanished family. I looked down at my hands, then at the reflection in the diner window. My reflection. Was I looking at Alex Miller, born 1995, raised in Portland? Or was I looking at Emily Peterson, vanished 1974, age 7? A wave of nausea washed over me. This was too much. My entire identity, my entire understanding of my life was crumbling around me. I scrolled further down the article, searching for any additional details, any clue. It mentioned a neighbor, an elderly woman named Martha Jenkins, who had reported them missing. She had seen Emily playing in the yard earlier that day. Emily, a happy, energetic child. And then nothing. The article ended with a plea from the Oakhaven police chief for any information, a plea that had gone unanswered for almost 50 years. 50 years. And now I was here, holding a photo of the vanished family, looking exactly like the missing girl. And I had just been in their house, where I'd felt an unseen presence, a chilling force that seemed to react to my presence. The memory that wasn't mine. It had led me straight to a cold case, to a missing child who looked exactly like me. And the terrifying implication was starting to solidify in my mind. What if the memory wasn't just a vision? What if it was a fragment of a life violently interrupted, a life that had somehow impossibly been transferred to me? My mind raced, trying to find a rational explanation. Adoption? Genetic anomaly? A long-lost twin? But none of it fit the terrifying precision of the memory, the immediate danger I'd felt in the house, or the uncanny, absolute match of my face to Emily's. I closed my eyes, trying to calm my racing heart. This wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was personal. Deeply, terrifyingly personal. I wasn't just an observer, I was entangled. The image of the house, dark and silent, flashed in my mind. And the sound, that dragging, thumping sound, it wasn't just a warning. It was a presence, a protector, or perhaps a captor. I had to go back. I knew it with a certainty that chilled me to the bone. I had to go back to Oakhaven, to the Peterson house, and find out what really happened to Emily. Because if my gut feeling was right, if this terrifying possibility was true, then Emily Peterson hadn't just vanished. She had become me. And whatever had caused her to vanish might still be in that house, waiting for her, waiting for me. This horrifying possibility that Emily Peterson had become me, and that whatever had caused her to vanish might still be in that house, waiting for her, waiting for me, echoed in my mind like a death knell. My breath hitched, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. It wasn't just a memory anymore, or a strange feeling. It was a terrifying, undeniable conviction that clawed at my sanity. My world, my identity, everything I thought I knew about myself was crumbling. Panic, cold and sharp, threatened to overwhelm me. I paced my small apartment, the worn carpet doing little to ground me. My own name felt foreign on my tongue. Sarah. Was I Sarah? Or was I Emily? The lines blurred, twisting into a grotesque tapestry of stolen identity and forgotten lives. I tried to rationalize it, to tell myself it was stress, a vivid dream, a psychological break. But the vividness of the memories, the undeniable pull to that house, the unsettling familiarity of Emily's face in the photo, were too potent to dismiss. I had to know. I had to confront this nightmare head-on, before it consumed me entirely. And the only place to start was the source of it all, Emily Peterson's house. The very thought sent shivers down my spine, but a strange, almost magnetic force tugged at me, a sense of urgency that wasn't entirely my own. It felt like Emily herself was pulling me there, desperate for answers. The drive was a blur of nervous energy. Each street I turned down felt increasingly familiar, a phantom map guiding me through a town I barely knew. When I finally pulled up to the curb, the Peterson house stood silent and imposing under the afternoon sun, a silent sentinel of forgotten secrets. A for sale sign, slightly faded, leaned precariously in the overgrown front yard, confirming my hunch that the house was empty. It was untouched, a time capsule waiting for a new owner, or in my case, a trespasser searching for a stolen past. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs as I approached the front door. The porch swing creaked gently in a non-existent breeze. I tried the handle, expecting it to be locked, but it turned with a soft click. My blood ran cold. It was open. Not forced, not broken, just unlocked. As if someone had left it that way, waiting for me. Hesitantly, I pushed the door open, a gust of stale, musty air wafting out to greet me. The interior was shrouded in a sepia-toned stillness. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light filtering through the drawn blinds. Every step I took on the creaking floorboard seemed to reverberate with a hollow echo, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I walked through the living room, past the dining area, and into the kitchen. Everything was exactly as I remembered it from my memories. The chipped counter tile, the way the light hit the old wooden table, the faint scent of cinnamon and something else, something metallic. My hand instinctively reached for a specific cupboard, and without thinking I pulled it open. Inside, nestled among forgotten spices, was a small, crudely carved wooden bird. My fingers traced its smooth contours, and a flood of emotion, a wave of profound sadness and longing washed over me. This bird, Emily had carved it herself, a gift for her mother. The memory was so vivid, so real, it was like I was reliving it. I could hear Emily's laugh, see the proud glint in her eyes as she presented it. It wasn't my memory, but it was my feeling. I moved deeper into the house, drawn by an invisible thread. Upstairs, I found what must have been Emily's art studio. The room was sparsely furnished, but an easel stood in the center, a canvas still on it, half finished. My gaze locked onto the painting. It was a haunting, abstract piece, dominated by dark, swirling colors. In the foreground, a figure, distorted and shadowy, seemed to emerge from the canvas, its form barely discernible, yet undeniably menacing. It was lurking, watching, almost waiting. As my eyes scanned the painting, a jolt, sharp and electric, shot through me. A memory more detailed and terrifying than any before ripped through my consciousness. I was standing in this very room, brush in hand, staring at this very canvas. But it wasn't me, Sarah, painting. It was Emily. Her hand trembled as she added another stroke of black to the lurking figure. She was afraid, deeply, utterly afraid. It's always there. Emily's voice, my voice, whispered in my mind, always watching. From the shadows. She had felt it too, the presence, the unseen eyes, the chilling certainty that something malevolent was just beyond the veil of perception. This painting wasn't just art. It was a desperate attempt to capture a horrifying reality. Emily had been trying to warn someone, or perhaps just to make sense of her own terror. I stumbled back, my heart hammering. This was too much. The memories were not just fragments anymore. They were entire scenes, imbued with Emily's emotions, Emily's fears. I was Emily, at least in some terrifying, inexplicable way. And if she had been afraid, truly afraid of whatever she was painting, then that whatever was still out there. Or worse still, in here. The house felt colder now, the silence oppressive. I had to get out. But as I turned to leave, my eyes caught a small wooden box tucked away on a dusty shelf in the corner. An old keepsake box, clearly handmade. Another surge of familiarity. Another prompt from Emily's buried memories. I knew what was inside. Without conscious thought, I reached for it. My fingers trembled as I opened the lid. Inside, nestled amongst dried flowers and old letters, was a worn photograph. It was a picture of Emily, younger, laughing, standing arm in arm with another woman. This woman had a kind, open face with warm brown eyes and a cascade of curly auburn hair. A name surfaced in my mind, clear as a bell, though I'd never heard it before: Jessica. Jessica Hayes. Emily's best friend. A desperate hope surged through me. Jessica. She would know Emily. She would know if Emily had been afraid, if she had been seeing things, if there was any explanation for this nightmare. She might be the only one who could offer a clue, who could tell me what Emily knew, what Emily felt before she vanished. I left the house, the unlocked door clicking shut behind me, the silence of the empty street a stark contrast to the cacophony in my mind. The photograph clutched in my hand, I drove away, my mind racing. I needed to find Jessica Hayes. It wasn't difficult. A quick online search for Jessica Hayes in this town, cross-referenced with any mention of Emily Peterson, led me to a social media profile. She was still here. She was a teacher at a local elementary school. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, the memories of Emily, the terrifying painting, and the unsettling feeling of being watched, all swirling together. The next morning, driven by a relentless urgency, I found myself outside the elementary school. I waited until the final bell, my stomach a nest of butterflies. When Jessica emerged, surrounded by a throng of chattering children, she looked older than in the photo, a few lines etched around her kind eyes, but undeniably the same woman. I approached her hesitantly, my voice a whisper. Jessica? Jessica Hayes. She turned, her smile polite but distant. Yes? Can I help you? My name is Sarah. I began, my voice wavering slightly. Sarah Miller. I need to talk to you about Emily Peterson. At the mention of Emily's name, Jessica's face visibly hardened. Her smile vanished, replaced by a guarded expression. Emily? Why are you asking about Emily? She's been gone for years. Her eyes narrowed, scrutinizing me. And you look familiar. Have we met? My heart pounded. This was it. The moment of truth. No, we haven't, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But I've been having these memories. Memories that aren't mine. Memories of Emily. I pulled out the old photograph from the keepsake box, the one with Emily and Jessica. I found this. Jessica's eyes widened as she took the photo. Her fingers traced Emily's smiling face, a flicker of pain crossing her features. Where did you get this? This was from Emily's old box. The one she kept hidden. Nobody knew about this box. Her gaze snapped back to me, sharper now, filled with a mixture of disbelief and dawning suspicion. How do you know about this box? And why do you look so much like her? I don't know how I know, I confessed, my voice raw with desperation. That's what I'm trying to figure out. It's like I'm seeing through her eyes, feeling what she felt. I saw a painting in her studio, Jessica. A painting of something dark, something lurking. She was terrified. Jessica's face went pale. She looked around as if checking to make sure no one was listening. The painting. She called it the Watcher. She said it wasn't just a fantasy. She said it was real. She said it was always there in the house, in the shadows. Her voice dropped to a whisper, laced with a fear I recognized instantly. Emily, she wasn't just scared, Sarah. She was convinced something was coming for her. Something that wanted to take her away. Something that wanted to replace her. The words hung in the air between us, chilling me to the bone. Replace her. It echoed my own terrifying realization. Jessica's eyes suddenly filled with a deep, unsettling knowledge, locked onto mine. Emily believed, Jessica continued, her voice barely audible, that if it caught you, if it took you, you wouldn't just vanish. You'd be erased, and it would take your place. It would become you. A cold dread settled over me, heavier than anything I had felt before. Jessica's words weren't just a confirmation of my worst fears. They were a direct, horrifying description of my current reality. I was Emily, and whatever had taken her, whatever had replaced her, was now aware. It knew I was back, and it was still waiting. But for what? And what was it going to do now that I, Emily, had returned? The truth, as Jessica spoke it, was far more monstrous than I could have ever imagined. They didn't just replace her, Emily. They created her. And they created you. The words hung in the air, heavier than any silence, colder than any dread. My breath hitched in my throat, a sharp, ragged gasp that felt like it tore something inside me. Created me? What was she talking about? My mind reeled, grasping for purchase in a world that was suddenly tilting off its axis. Jessica's eyes, usually so warm and full of life, were now shadowed with a profound sadness, a kind of weary resignation that chilled me to the bone. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper, as if the very walls of the cafe might be listening, might be reporting back to the unseen architects of my nightmare. It started years ago, a clandestine project known only as Project Chimera. Dr. Elias Thorne, a brilliant but utterly ruthless neuroscientist, believed he could perfect the transfer of consciousness, of memory, of personality itself. Not just memory implantation, Emily, but full-scale identity replication. Imagine it. Taking an entire person, their thoughts, their feelings, their history, and imprinting it onto another. Or even more terrifying, fabricating a new identity from scratch. A perfect persona designed for a specific purpose, then embedding it so deeply that the host believes it's their own. My head swam. But why? And what does this have to do with Sarah? With me? Jessica took a shaky breath. Sarah was the original subject. Or rather, the template. Thorne was obsessed with a particular psychological profile, a blend of resilience, empathy, and intellectual curiosity. He found it in Sarah. He wanted to replicate her, to create a series of individuals who could be subtly guided, influenced, perhaps even controlled from the inside out. Imagine an army of perfectly curated minds, each believing they are unique, yet each fulfilling a pre-programmed destiny. A wave of nausea washed over me. An army? For what? He never fully revealed his ultimate goal, Jessica admitted, her gaze distant, lost in some terrifying memory. Some speculated it was for corporate espionage, others for political manipulation. But the scale of his ambition was monstrous. He wanted to rewrite human nature one mind at a time. Sarah was his groundbreaking experiment. He managed to extract and digitize a vast amount of her memories, her personality traits, her core essence. But there was a problem, a flaw in his process. What flaw? I whispered, my voice barely audible. The original consciousness proved too resilient. Sarah's true self, her deepest identity, fought back. It wasn't completely eradicated. It was suppressed, buried under layers of fabricated memories, a new life, a new narrative designed to be seamless. But it was still there, a ghost in the machine, a whisper in the subconscious. This was it. This was the monstrous truth. My skin crawled. You're saying I am Sarah? Jessica nodded slowly, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. Yes, Emily. You were Sarah. Your original memories were systematically overwritten, your past rewritten, your entire life since that accident a carefully constructed lie. The Emily persona, the life you've been living, the memories you thought were yours, they were all implanted. They were designed to keep Sarah's true consciousness dormant, to keep you believing you were someone else, someone controlled, someone safe within their fabricated reality. The world went silent around me. The clatter of plates, the murmur of conversations, the distant city hum. It all faded into a dull roar in my ears. I was Sarah. The memory that wasn't mine wasn't just a single event. It was my entire existence since the crash. Every laugh, every tear, every moment of joy or sorrow I'd experienced as Emily. It was all a lie. A performance. Prison. But then what about the one I saw? I choked out, my voice raw. The one living my life, the one who looked like me, who was me but wasn't. Jessica's face hardened. That, Emily, is the replacement. The perfected persona. The one that was supposed to completely obliterate Sarah's original consciousness and fully embody the Emily identity. The one that they believe is the success of Project Chimera. The one that is now aware of your return, of Sarah's return. It's a duplicate? No, not a duplicate. It's the intended outcome, the full realization of their work. While your original consciousness, Sarah, managed to fight its way back, breaking through the suppression, the Emily persona continued to exist, to function. When your true self reasserted itself, the implanted persona was essentially dislodged. It's like a sophisticated program that's been running, and suddenly the original operating system tries to reboot. The program doesn't just vanish, it becomes an independent entity, a parallel consciousness, still tied to the physical vessel it once inhabited. It's the manufactured identity, now untethered, yet still striving to fulfill its programming. My mind struggled to grasp the enormity of it. An imprinted personality, now its own entity, aware of my presence, aware that its existence was threatened by my return. It was a phantom twin, a ghost of a life I never lived, now alive and hostile. So the crash, it wasn't an accident, was it? I asked, a bitter taste in my mouth. Jessica shook her head. No, it was a controlled event, a way to isolate Sarah, to initiate the transfer and suppression process. They needed a traumatic event to create the opening, to make the new identity plausible. They erased Sarah, and they built Emily on top of her. My hands trembled, clutching the cold ceramic mug. Every detail of my life, every memory I cherished, every relationship I held dear, a lie. My parents, my friends, my career. Had they all been meticulously crafted, too? Were they actors in this elaborate charade? My parents, I whispered, the thought piercing me like a knife. David and Susan, are they real? Do they know? Jessica hesitated, her gaze dropping. They are real, Emily, but they don't know the full truth. They were manipulated, too. Given a narrative, fed information. They believe you are their daughter, Emily, who survived a terrible accident with amnesia. They were part of the controlled environment designed to reinforce the new identity. Thorne was thorough. He created an entire world for Emily to inhabit. The betrayal was a fresh wound, deeper than any physical pain. My own family, unwitting accomplices in my erasure. And now what? I demanded, the horror giving way to a cold, burning anger. Now that I'm back, now that Sarah's back, what happens? What does this replacement want? And what do they want? The replacement is a construct striving for self-preservation, Jessica explained, her voice urgent. It sees you, Sarah, as a threat to its existence, its purpose. It wants to reestablish dominance, to fully re-imprint you, or to eliminate you. And Thorne's people, the remnants of Project Chimera, they want to contain the anomaly. Your return is a catastrophic failure in their grand design. They cannot allow the truth to come out, nor can they allow an uncontrolled Sarah to exist. They will try to capture you, to bring you back into the fold, to finish what they started. Finish what they started? My blood ran cold. Erase me again? Or worse, Jessica conceded, her eyes flicking nervously towards the cafe entrance. Thorn was ruthless. He wouldn't hesitate to terminate a failed experiment if it threatened to expose his life's work. He'd silence you permanently. A chill snaked its way down my spine. I was a loose end, a glitch in their matrix. And the world I thought was home was actually a hunting ground. How do you know all this, Jessica? I pressed, my mind racing, trying to piece together the fragments of this horrifying puzzle. Were you involved? I was a junior researcher, she admitted, her voice laced with shame and regret. I joined Thorn's team, dazzled by his intellect, by the promise of scientific breakthroughs. I didn't understand the ethical abyss we were diving into until it was too late. When I saw what they did to Sarah, what they were doing to you, I tried to blow the whistle. It didn't work. I barely escaped with my life and some encrypted data. I've been living under the radar ever since, watching, waiting, hoping you would break free. The data, I said, a flicker of hope igniting in the darkness. What was in it? Fragments, notes, the core schematics of the transfer process. But more importantly, a list of other potential subjects, other chimeras they were developing. And a name, Dr. Michael Vance. He was Thorn's second in command, but he had a conscience. He disappeared shortly after I did. I believe he might have developed a countermeasure, a way to reverse the process or at least to protect you. He was the one who left me the encrypted files, knowing I'd eventually find a way to decode them. Michael Vance, I repeated, the name a lifeline in the storm. Where is he? Jessica pulled out a small, worn notebook from her bag, quickly scribbling something on a page before tearing it out. This is an old address, a safe house he used. It's a long shot, Emily, but it's the only lead we have to truly understand and fight back. You need to get there, and you need to be careful. Thorn's people are everywhere. And the replacement, it's not just a memory. It's active. It's intelligent. It was designed to mimic you perfectly, to anticipate your moves. It knows your habits, your fears, your loved ones. It is your shadow, and it will use everything it knows to stop you. She pushed the crumpled piece of paper across the table. My hand shook as I picked it up, the ink smudging slightly under my trembling fingers. It was an address in a remote part of upstate New York. A sense of urgency, cold and sharp, pierced through the shock. My life, my very identity was at stake. I was Sarah, trapped in a body and a world that wasn't truly mine, hunted by a phantom version of myself and the monstrous minds who created it. I had to find Michael Vance. Go, Jessica urged, her eyes wide with a desperate plea. Don't contact anyone you know. Don't go home. Assume every move you make is being watched. You are a ghost, Sarah. A ghost fighting for your own existence. And you have to disappear before they can make you disappear for good. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor, a sound that seemed to echo ominously in the sudden silence of my awareness. Every face in the cafe seemed to scrutinize me. Every shadow seemed to deepen. The world was no longer benign. It was a labyrinth built by my enemies. I was on my own, running from a life that was never mine, towards a truth I couldn't yet fully comprehend. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat of terror and resolve. I had to find Vance. I had to reclaim Sarah. I had to fight the ghost of Emily, and the monsters who had created her. And I had to do it before they caught me, before they silenced the real me forever. The chilling truth had ripped through me, leaving me exposed and raw. Every fiber of my being screamed for action, but my mind, still reeling from the full impact of the deception, struggled to form a coherent plan. They knew I knew. That was the most terrifying thought. They would be searching for me, their net already tightening. My first instinct was to run, to vanish, but where? I had no identity, no safe haven, just a fractured sense of who I was and a burning need to protect Sarah. My escape from the facility had been a blur of adrenaline and instinct. I remember the cold night air hitting my face, the distant city hum, and the frantic pounding of my own heart against my ribs. I had blended into the shadows, a ghost among ghosts, until I found myself on the fringes of a bustling downtown, a place I instinctively knew, yet felt utterly alien to. My wallet, miraculously, was still in my pocket, containing a driver's license with my face, but a name that felt like a costume. Emily Carter. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. I needed to think, to find a place where I could process this seismic shift in my reality. My apartment. The place where Emily Carter lived. It was a risk, a monumental one, but it was also the only place I might find answers, or at least a starting point. If they expected me to run, they might not expect me to return to the very heart of the lie. I hailed a cab, the mundane act feeling surreal as I tried to project an air of normalcy, my gaze constantly sweeping the rearview mirror. Every passing car a potential threat. The apartment building loomed, a familiar silhouette against the night sky, yet now it seemed to pulse with an ominous energy. The lobby was empty, the elevator ride agonizingly slow. Each floor I passed felt like a step deeper into enemy territory. My hand trembled as I inserted the key into the lock of apartment 4B. The door swung open silently, revealing the meticulously arranged life of Emily Carter. Nothing seemed out of place. The minimalist furniture, the framed art, the neatly stacked books, all screaming Emily. But now my eyes saw through the facade. This wasn't my life. This was a stage set, a meticulously crafted prison of memory. A wave of nausea washed over me. I needed to find something, anything that belonged to the real me. I moved through the apartment like a phantom, my senses on high alert. The bedroom, the living room, the kitchen, each space offered no clue, only confirming the depth of the deception. Then I remembered something. Not a memory, but a flicker of intuition. A feeling of unease I'd had about a particular loose floorboard in the closet. It was a detail I dismissed as Emily, but now it resonated with a primal urgency. Dropping to my knees, I fumbled for the edge of the board. It creaked as I pried it up, revealing a small hidden compartment. My breath hitched. Inside, nestled amongst dust bunnies, was a small worn leather-bound journal and a burner phone, old and clunky. My heart hammered. This was it. This had to be mine. The journal was filled with a familiar handwriting. Yet the entries were not about Emily Carter. They were about a woman named Jessica Hayes. My name. The entries were fragmented, desperate, chronicling a growing paranoia, a sense of being watched, of memories shifting, of a life being slowly stolen. The last entry, dated just a few weeks before the accident, was chilling. They're closing in. Vance is acting strange. Sarah. I need to get Sarah out. If anything happens to me, look for Project Chimera. Tell Daniel. He'll know. Project Chimera. Daniel. The words were a lifeline thrown into a churning sea of confusion. Jessica Hayes. That was me. Not Emily. I clutched the journal, tears blurring my vision. This was proof. Proof of my existence, proof of their crime. Vance. He was acting strange. Did that mean he was involved? Or was he also a victim, perhaps even trying to help me before they silenced me? And Sarah, my daughter. The thought of her, innocent and vulnerable, fueled a fierce resolve within me. I powered on the burner phone. It was ancient, but it worked. There were only a few numbers stored, none familiar. No text, no call history. It was clean, a tool meant for one specific purpose. I didn't know who Daniel was or how to contact him, but Project Chimera felt like the key. My focus shifted to the computer in the living room. It was risky leaving a digital footprint, but I had to know more. I booted it up, my fingers flying across the keyboard, searching for Project Chimera. The results were sparse, mostly academic papers on genetic engineering and mythical creatures. Nothing that seemed to fit a shadowy organization. I refined my search, adding keywords like memory manipulation, covert operations, human experimentation. The results started to shift. Deep dives into obscure scientific journals, articles on fringe psychological research, and then a link to a heavily encrypted forum. It was a rabbit hole, but one I felt compelled to explore. The forum was dedicated to conspiracy theories, but buried within its layers were discussions about a clandestine organization known only as the Architects. Their alleged goal: to rewrite human consciousness, to perfect memory, to control perception. Project Chimera was mentioned once, in a fleeting post, as a rumored subproject, focusing on adaptive memory integration. Adaptive memory integration. It clicked into place with a sickening thud. They weren't just erasing memories, they were replacing them, weaving new pasts, new identities. They had done it to me. They had turned Jessica Hayes into Emily Carter. And Vance, what role did he play? Was he one of the architects or another one of their unwitting pawns? As I delved deeper, a sudden noise from the hallway outside jolted me. A faint metallic click, followed by a soft scraping sound. My blood ran cold. Someone was at the door. They had found me. Panic seized me, but the fear was quickly overridden by a surge of adrenaline-fueled clarity. I was no longer Emily. I was Jessica, and Jessica Hayes was not going to be caught. I grabbed the journal and the burner phone, shoving them into my pocket. My eyes darted around the apartment, searching for an escape route. The fire escape. I threw open the window, the cool night air a shock against my skin. Just as I started to climb out, the front door burst open with a resounding crash. Two figures clad in dark tactical gear stormed in, their faces obscured by balaclavas. Their movements were swift, practiced, terrifyingly efficient. They weren't police. They were something far more sinister. One of them barked into a comms device, his voice distorted. Target sighted. Initiating containment. I didn't hesitate. I scrambled onto the fire escape, my hands scraped raw against the cold metal. The sound of their heavy boots pounding across the wooden floorboards spurred me on. I didn't look back. I descended rapidly, each rung a desperate prayer. As I reached the alley below, a car screeched to a halt at the far end, its headlights blinding. More of them. They were everywhere. I was trapped. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. There was nowhere to go. Then a flicker of movement in a darkened doorway caught my eye. A figure silhouetted against the dim streetlights waved me frantically towards them. It was a woman, her face obscured by shadow, but something about her posture, her urgency, felt different from the faceless pursuers. Was it a trap? Or a desperate gamble? I had no choice. With the tactical team closing in from above and the car blocking my escape, I bolted towards the mysterious figure. Every instinct screamed danger, but the alternative was capture, and that meant the end. The woman grabbed my arm, pulling me into the darkness of the doorway, then through a hidden side door I hadn't even noticed, slamming it shut behind us. We were plunged into absolute darkness, the muffled sounds of the chase fading behind the thick door. My breathing was ragged, my body trembling. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice hoarse, my hand instinctively reaching for the journal in my pocket, a grounding reminder of my true identity. A soft click, and a small penlight illuminated her face. She was older, with sharp, intelligent eyes that held a flicker of weary defiance. Her expression was grim, but there was no malice, only a profound sense of urgency. "My name is Olivia," she said, her voice low and steady. "And you, Jessica, are in more danger than you can possibly imagine. We need to go. Now." Jessica. The sound of my real name, spoken by a stranger, was a balm to my shattered psyche. A proof that I wasn't entirely alone. But the danger was palpable, a suffocating blanket. Olivia. Was she the Daniel I was supposed to contact, or someone else entirely? I had no time to question, no time to doubt. The chase was far from over. I knew one thing for certain. Olivia was my only chance, and I had to trust her. My fight for Sarah, for Vance, for my own stolen identity had just truly begun. My fight for Sarah, for Vance, for my own stolen identity had just truly begun. The alley became a blur of motion, a symphony of pounding footsteps and ragged breaths. Olivia, surprisingly agile, led the way, weaving through overflowing dumpsters and discarded crates with practiced ease. My own legs, fueled by a primal surge of adrenaline, moved with a speed I didn't know I possessed. Behind us, the shouts grew closer, then faded, replaced by the distant wail of sirens. They weren't coming for us, not yet. The sirens were a distraction, a cover for the real hunters who operated in the shadows. We burst onto a busy street, instantly swallowed by the chaos of rush hour. Olivia didn't hesitate, pulling me through a throng of bewildered pedestrians, past honking taxis, and into the mouth of a subway station. The air grew heavy with the smell of ozone and stale concrete. A train screeched to a halt, its doors hissing open. "Now!" Olivia yelled, pushing me into the crowded car just as the doors began to close. We squeezed in, pressed against strangers, trying to look like any other commuters. I scanned the faces around us, my heart hammering against my ribs. Every pair of eyes felt like a threat, every casual glance a potential recognition. But no one seemed to notice us, lost in their own worlds of headphones and smartphones. Olivia stood beside me, her breathing still heavy, but her eyes were sharp, constantly moving. She caught my gaze and gave a subtle shake of her head, a silent command to remain calm. The train rattled on, carrying us deeper into the city's labyrinthine underbelly. Only when we emerged 20 minutes later Several stops away and bathed in the dim light of a different station, did Olivia finally speak, her voice a low murmur. We're clear for now. They'll be tracking the subway cameras, but we've bought ourselves some time. We walked for another 10 minutes, through streets that slowly transitioned from bustling commercial districts to quieter residential areas, until we reached an old, unassuming brownstone. Olivia led me up a narrow staircase, unlocked a nondescript door, and ushered me into a small, sparsely furnished apartment. It was clean, functional, and devoid of any personal touches. A safe house. Sit, she said, gesturing to a worn armchair. She went to the window, pulling back a corner of the curtain to peer out, her movements precise and wary. I know you have questions, a lot of them, and you have every right to be furious. I leaned forward, my voice hoarse. Furious doesn't even begin to cover it. You led me into a trap, Olivia. You told me to trust you, and then you put a target on my back. She turned from the window, her expression unreadable. I didn't lead you into a trap, Michael. I led you into a controlled exposure. The only way to truly understand what you're up against, to truly believe me, was for you to see them for yourself, to feel the heat of their pursuit, to know that everything I've told you is real, and far more dangerous than you could have imagined. A controlled exposure? I scoffed. People were shooting at us, Olivia. That's not a test. That's an assassination attempt. They weren't trying to kill you, she countered, her voice firm. They were trying to capture you, to bring you back to Dr. Elias Thorne, the man who orchestrated Vance's disappearance and your memory implant, the man who runs Project Chimera. The name hit me like a physical blow. Project Chimera. The words echoed the fragmented whispers in my dreams, the unsettling sense of something monstrous lurking beneath the surface of my stolen life. Project Chimera, I repeated, tasting the words. What is it? Olivia finally sat down opposite me, her gaze steady. It's an advanced neurological and psychological manipulation program, a way to not just steal identities but to erase them, rewrite them, and implant new ones. To create untraceable assets, sleeper agents, or even just convenient scapegoats, all with meticulously crafted, entirely false memories. My mind reeled. So you're saying, my memories of Sarah, of my life, they're all fake? The thought was a chilling abyss, threatening to swallow me whole. Not entirely, Olivia clarified. That's the insidious part. They take a foundation of your real life, your skills, your personality traits, even some genuine emotional connections, and they meticulously weave in the fabricated narrative. They graft a new identity onto your existing psyche, making it feel utterly real, utterly yours. It's a surgical strike on the very core of who you are, making you believe a lie so thoroughly that the truth becomes incomprehensible. Why? I whispered, the word barely audible. Why me? Why Vance? Vance was a key researcher for Project Chimera, Olivia revealed, her voice dropping to a near whisper. He was brilliant, a pioneer in neurolinguistic programming and memory recall. He developed the core algorithms that made the project possible. But he started to have doubts. He saw the dark path it was heading down, the unethical implications. He tried to blow the whistle, and they silenced him. I finished, the pieces finally clicking into place, forming a horrifying picture. They did more than silence him, Olivia corrected, her eyes darkening. They used his own technology against him. They erased his identity, repurposed his expertise, and assigned him to a new role within the project, a living ghost of his former self. But Vance was smarter than they gave him credit for. He left contingencies, breadcrumbs, safeguards. And I was one of them. I realized, a cold dread settling in my stomach. My memory that isn't mine. That was Vance's way of reaching out. A failsafe. Olivia nodded. Exactly. Vance knew they would eventually come for him. He designed a system to trigger a latent memory fragment, a ghost memory, in a select few individuals who have been exposed to Project Chimera's initial testing phases. You, Michael, were one of those early test subjects, unknowingly exposed during a seemingly routine medical trial years ago. He implanted a trigger, a specific phrase or image, that would unlock a fragment of his own memory, a warning in your mind. He chose you because you were far enough removed from the active project to be overlooked, but close enough to have been part of its genesis. So, the memory of the Red Room, the numbers, the name Elias Thorne. That's Vance trying to tell me something from beyond his own stolen mind. It's his call for help, Olivia confirmed. and his call for justice. He knew that if someone picked up on it, they would eventually try to find him, or at least uncover the truth. "And you?" I pressed, my suspicion still lingering despite the overwhelming revelations. "Where do you fit into all of this? Are you one of them? A handler? Or another victim?" A shadow crossed her face. "I was an operative. Recruited young, highly skilled, and deeply disillusioned. I worked for Project Chimera for years, believing I was serving a higher purpose. I was one of Thorne's most trusted agents, but I saw what they did to Vance. I saw the human cost, the ethical lines they crossed with impunity. I saw the power they were accumulating, and the terrifying potential for abuse. Vance's fate was a wake-up call. I've been working from the inside, trying to find a way to expose them, to dismantle Project Chimera from within. When your ghost memory was triggered, I knew it was my chance." "So, you're a double agent," I stated, the gravity of it sinking in. "And you're telling me all of this now in a safe house, after leading me on a chase across the city. Because now you understand the stakes," Olivia said, her voice firm, urgent. "Now you know they are real, they are powerful, and they will stop at nothing to protect their secrets. And now you're the only one who can help me." Vance left something behind, a physical failsafe, a data cache that could expose Project Chimera and bring down Elias Thorne. He hid it in a place only someone with his specific memories, or someone guided by them, could find. "And you think I can find it?" I asked, a new wave of purpose washing over me, mixed with a healthy dose of fear. "I don't think, Michael." "I know," Olivia replied, her eyes intense. "That ghost memory, the one that isn't yours, it's not just a warning. It's a key, a roadmap. Vance built it that way. We need to follow it piece by piece, before Thorne realizes what he's truly unleashed." "What's the first step?" I asked, the exhaustion momentarily forgotten, replaced by a burning resolve. "Sarah Vance, my stolen life. This was the path to getting it all back." Olivia stood, walked to a small table, and unrolled a large, faded map of the city. Her finger traced a line, then stopped at a specific district, a part of town I vaguely recognized. Vance always had a fascination with history, with hidden corners of the city. His first clue, the real one, is hidden in plain sight. An old forgotten landmark, a place he used to visit regularly, a place filled with secrets, just like his research. She pointed to a small, circled area on the map. The old city library archives. It's vast, labyrinthine, and largely unmonitored. It's where Vance spent countless hours researching classical literature, ancient texts, and the very nature of memory itself. He often said the greatest truths were hidden in the most obvious places. My gaze fixed on the map, the weight of the task settling heavily on my shoulders. The old city library archives. A place where knowledge was stored, and perhaps where the truth of my existence and the fate of Vance awaited. The chase was far from over. This was only the beginning of the hunt. The colossal stone edifice of the old city library loomed against the twilight sky, an anachronism of grandeur in a city of glass and steel. Its Gothic architecture seemed to swallow the last vestiges of daylight, casting long, menacing shadows. This wasn't just a library. It was a fortress of forgotten tales, a tomb of paper and ink, and I prayed, a sanctuary for the truth I so desperately sought. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of aged paper, dust, and something else, a faint, almost metallic tang that reminded me inexplicably of the sterile labs from my fragmented memories. The main reading room was a hushed cathedral, but it was the archives I needed. Down a winding staircase, past a stern-faced librarian named Martha, whose spectacles rested precariously on her nose, I descended into the labyrinth below. The archives were a world unto themselves. Stacks of shelves taller than any man, stretched into the dim distance, packed with countless volumes, boxes, and microfiche reels. The only sound was the soft hum of the ventilation system and the whisper of my own breath. Each step echoed, amplified by the oppressive silence, making me feel like an intruder in a sacred, forgotten space. "Looking for anything in particular?" Martha's voice, surprisingly soft, startled me. She had followed, her eyes, magnified by her thick lenses, scrutinizing me. "Research," I managed, my voice a little rough. "Medical history specifically. Around the late 90s, early 2000s. It was a vague enough answer to avoid suspicion, yet pointed enough to narrow my search. She nodded slowly, a knowing glint in her eyes that made my skin prickle. Records from that era are extensive. Much of it hasn't been digitized. You'll be spending some time with the microfiche readers, I expect. She gestured to a bank of ancient machines, their screens faintly glowing like ghostly eyes. And the card catalog, of course, for anything more obscure. Obscure was exactly what I needed. I spent the next few hours in a blur of flickering screens, scrolling through endless reels of faded newspaper articles, medical journals, and city records. My eyes ached, my head pounded, and a growing sense of despair began to settle in. I searched for Vance, memory research, experimental psychology, cognitive science, neural transfer, but nothing yielded a hit that felt relevant. It was like searching for a ghost in a graveyard of information. The more I looked, the more I felt the weight of the task. This organization, whoever they were, was meticulous. They wouldn't leave obvious breadcrumbs. If I was to find anything, it would be hidden, disguised, or misfiled. My mind drifted back to Miller's words. They tried to erase him. If they erased Vance, they would have erased all traces of their work too. But Miller also said they couldn't erase everything. A tiny spark of hope flickered within me. I took a break, stretching my stiff limbs, and walked past the towering shelves, letting my fingers trail over the spine of dusty books. There was an entire section dedicated to local history, civic projects, and urban development plans from the late 20th century. It seemed unlikely, but something tugged at me. A faint, almost imperceptible feeling, like a memory trying to surface. I remembered a blurry image, a blueprint perhaps, or a schematic, from one of the fragmented memories. It had a logo, a stylized R within a circle, and beneath it, a word, replicate. Replicate. The word echoed in my mind. It wasn't a common term for a medical facility or a research program. It sounded more like a project, an initiative. I returned to the card catalog, my heart thumping a little faster. This time I didn't look for medical terms. I looked for Project Replicate. Nothing. My shoulders slumped. It was a long shot, a desperate guess. Then a thought struck me. What if it wasn't a project name in the public record? What if it was a code or a label hidden within a larger, more innocuous category? I went back to the local history section, specifically looking for government grants, urban renewal projects, or even proposals for new facilities that might have been quietly approved and then disappeared from public discourse. Hours bled into more hours. The library grew quiet, the last few patrons having long since departed. Martha had left, leaving a note about closing procedures, trusting me, or perhaps simply not caring enough to kick me out. The silence in the archives became absolute, broken only by the rustle of paper as I pulled out another yellowed file. My fingers, grimy with dust, finally brushed against a file labeled, innocuously enough, City Planning and Infrastructure, Annex 1998. It was tucked away, almost purposefully obscured, behind a much larger, more frequently accessed folder on public parks. My heart gave a jolt. Annex B. Why B? Why not A or C? The detail felt off. I pulled it out, my hands trembling slightly. It was thin, surprisingly light, and felt brittle with age. I carried it to a nearby table, careful not to damage the fragile paper. Inside, there were a few architectural drawings, proposals for a new cognitive research facility on the outskirts of the city, and a series of budget allocations. The facility was referred to as the Replicate Institute. My breath hitched. Replicate. It was real. The documents outlined a facility dedicated to advanced neurological mapping and cognitive enhancement. The language was sterile, full of scientific jargon designed to sound harmless, even beneficial. But as I delved deeper, my eyes scanned for familiar names, for anything that would connect it to Vance, or to my own fractured consciousness. Then I found it. Tucked at the very bottom of the file, stapled haphazardly, was a memo. It wasn't formal, no official letterhead, just a typed sheet of paper with a date, October 17, 2001. My false memory, the one that started all of this, was dated October 18, 2001, one day apart. The memo was addressed to a Dr. Elias Thorne and signed by a Dr. Abigail Finch. It detailed a critical phase transition in Project Chimera. Yes, Chimera, not Replicate, indicating a deeper, more secretive layer hidden beneath the public face of the Replicate Institute. The memo stated, Subject 7 has shown remarkable integration with the donor's neural pathways. The echo effect is stable. We are ready for the final transfer protocol tomorrow, October 18th. Vance is proving invaluable in refining the process. Vance, Dr. Elias Thorne, Dr. Abigail Finch, Project Chimera. Subject 7. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. Subject 7. Was that me? Was I Subject 7? And Vance, invaluable in refining the process? He wasn't just a victim. He was an active participant, or perhaps a key component. The memory of him, the desperate plea in his eyes, solidified. He was trying to warn me, trying to tell me his part in this horror. The memo continued. We must ensure this procedure remains entirely off-book. Any public records referencing Subject 7, or the specific nature of the Chimera Protocol, must be purged immediately following the successful transfer. The Institute's public face as the Replicate Institute must remain untarnished. They tried to erase everything, and they almost succeeded, but they missed this one small unassuming file in a forgotten corner of the city archives. A sudden sharp clang echoed from deeper within the archives. My head snapped up. It sounded like something heavy had fallen, or been dropped. My heart hammered against my ribs, an urgent drumbeat in the sudden terrifying silence. Was I alone? Had someone else found me? Or had they been here all along, watching, waiting for me to uncover the truth they had so meticulously buried? I clutched the faded memo, the names and dates burning themselves into my mind. The Replicate Institute, Dr. Elias Thorne, Dr. Abigail Finch, Project Chimera, Vance. The pieces were starting to connect, forming a horrifying picture. But the clang, it wasn't just a dropped book. It was deliberate. It was a warning, or worse, a signal. My mind raced. I had the names. I had the location of the institute. But I also had a target on my back, bigger and brighter than ever before. The archives, once a sanctuary of information, now felt like a trap. I had to get out. I had to find Jessica. And I had to find out what happened to Vance and what Project Chimera truly was. The truth was far more terrifying than I could have imagined, and the people behind it were still out there, watching, waiting. I had to get out. I had to find Jessica, and I had to find out what happened to Vance and what Project Chimera truly was. The truth was far more terrifying than I could have imagined, and the people behind it were still out there, watching, waiting. The sterile white walls of the recovery room seemed to close in, the soft hum of the medical equipment a sinister lullaby. My head throbbed, a dull ache behind my eyes, but the mental fog was lifting, replaced by a searing clarity. I wasn't just a patient recovering from a mysterious accident. I was a pawn in a game I didn't understand, a game with my very identity as the prize. I needed to move. Every instinct screamed for escape. I pushed myself up, the foreline tugging painfully at my arm. With a grimace, I ripped it free, a small bead of blood welling on my skin. My legs felt like lead, but adrenaline coursed through my veins, lending me a desperate strength. I stumbled to the door, peering through the small reinforced window. The hallway was empty, save for a distant security camera blinking its red eye. This wasn't a hospital, it was a holding cell. I remembered the guard from earlier, a burly man named Frank, who had been unusually compliant when I'd complained of a headache and asked for water. He'd left the door ajar for a moment, just enough for me to see a keycard reader. My mind, now sharp and focused, replayed the sequence. Frank swiping his card, the brief green flash, the soft click. I didn't have a keycard, but I had something else. My memories, fragmented and conflicting, were a strange weapon. I recalled a conversation with Vance long before all this about biometric security, about how some systems had backdoors, glitches, even manual overrides. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble. I rummaged through the bedside drawer, finding a discarded pen. The tip was broken, but the plastic casing was sturdy. I remembered Vance mentioning an emergency override panel, usually hidden behind a false plate near the reader, for maintenance. I scanned the wall next to the door, my fingers tracing the smooth surface. There, a barely perceptible seam. With trembling hands, I pried at it with the pen. It gave way with a faint click, revealing a small panel of wires and a tiny red button. Pure instinct, or perhaps a residual memory that wasn't mine, guided my hand. I pressed the button. The red light on the keycard reader flickered, then turned green. The door clicked open. A wave of nausea washed over me, but I pushed through it, stepping out into the deserted corridor. I moved quickly, hugging the walls, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had no idea where I was, what floor, what facility this even was. It felt deep underground, the air recycled and heavy. I passed a series of identical doors, each humming with unseen machinery. This place was a maze designed to disorient. I needed a way out, and I needed to find a communication device. My pockets were empty, my phone, wallet, everything gone. I spotted a janitor's closet, the door slightly ajar. Inside, amidst mops and buckets, was an old wall-mounted landline phone. It was a long shot, but it was my only shot. My hand shook as I dialed Jessica's number, the one I knew by heart, the one I'd called 1,000 times. It rang once, twice, then a cold automated voice informed me the number was disconnected. My stomach dropped. Disconnected? That didn't make sense. Jessica wouldn't just vanish. Panic started to claw at me, but I forced it down. Jessica was in danger. Vance was gone. I was the last piece of this puzzle, and they needed me. I had to think. What would Vance have done? He was meticulous, paranoid, always had a backup plan. I remembered Vance's old apartment, the one he kept even after moving in with me. He called it his thinking space, a sanctuary for his research. He'd made a point of telling me he kept a spare key hidden in a specific, obscure spot, a loose brick in the alley wall behind the building, under a leaky pipe. At the time, I thought it was just Vance being Vance, overly dramatic. Now it felt like a lifeline. Getting there was another challenge. I had to navigate through the labyrinthine facility, past security checkpoints that seemed to appear out of nowhere. I ducked into stairwells, hid behind equipment carts, my body screaming in protest with every strained movement. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I found an exit that led to a service alley, bathed in the pale, sickly glow of a street lamp. I was out. The city outside was a blur of noise and light, alien and overwhelming. I was disoriented, without a coat, without money, just the clothes on my back. I walked, my legs aching, the cold night air biting at my exposed skin. I didn't know how far I was from Vance's old place, but I kept moving, driven by a desperate urgency. Hours later, exhausted and shivering, I found myself in the familiar alley. My fingers were numb, but I found the loose brick, pulled it out, and there it was, a tarnished brass key. A wave of relief so profound it almost buckled my knees washed over me. Vance's apartment was dark and dusty, smelling faintly of old paper and stale coffee. It was exactly as he'd left it, a testament to his eccentric mind. Books were stacked precariously, scientific journals lay open, and whiteboards were covered in complex equations and diagrams. This was it. This was where the answers lay. I started searching methodically, frantically. I pulled out drawers, scanned bookshelves, my eyes darting over every surface. Nothing obvious. No big red button labeled Project Chimera Secrets. But Vance was smarter than that. He hid things in plain sight. I remembered a conversation we had about a specific type of encryption, one he claimed was unbreakable, if you didn't know the key. He'd laughed, saying he'd even used it to hide his grocery list sometimes. It clicked. The journals. The ones with the strange symbols in the margins. I grabbed a thick, leather-bound notebook from his desk, its pages filled with his neat, precise handwriting. Interspersed between scientific observations and personal anecdotes were those symbols, like a secret language. He'd once mentioned a cipher key hidden in his favorite book, a worn copy of Moby Dick he kept on his nightstand. I found the book, its spine-cracked, pages dog-eared. Tucked inside the very last page, taped securely, was a small folded piece of paper. On it, a series of numbers and letters. The cipher key. My hands trembled as I worked, painstakingly translating the cryptic notes in Vance's journal. What I uncovered sent a chill straight through me, colder than the night air I just endured. Project Chimera wasn't just about memory implantation. It was about identity transfer, taking the entire consciousness, the very essence of a person, and implanting it into a new, younger, healthier host body. The original consciousness of the host was suppressed, pushed deep down, but never truly erased. It was a monstrous, audacious attempt at immortality for the ultra-rich and powerful. Vance was the lead scientist on the project. He had perfected the process, making it stable, viable. But then he'd seen the horrific implications, the ethical nightmare of erasing one mind to replace it with another. He'd witnessed the original personalities fighting back, the host bodies suffering, the profound trauma inflicted on those whose minds were stolen. He tried to stop it, to expose Ethel Labs, the shadowy corporation behind it all. And then came the most gut-wrenching revelation. The journal detailed specific subjects, their original identities, and their new host bodies. My eyes fell on an entry, dated just a few months before my accident. Subject Delta 7. Original consciousness, Michael Sterling. Host body, genetically compatible male, age 32. Project success rate high. Challenges, residual host memories showing unusual resilience. My breath hitched. Michael Sterling, that was my name, but the original consciousness wasn't mine. The Michael Sterling I knew, the one living this life, was the implanted one. The memories that weren't mine, the flashes of a different life, a different family, a different me, were the desperate cries of the original Michael, trapped within his own body. I wasn't just a victim of an accident. I was a living vessel, a walking ghost. My entire life, my memories, my very personality, had been a meticulously constructed fabrication. Vance had been trying to help the original Michael. He'd been trying to reverse the process to restore the true self. The accident hadn't been an accident at all. It was an attempted termination of the host, or a recapture, because the original consciousness was breaking through, threatening the integrity of the implanted identity. And Jessica, her name appeared in Vance's notes too. Not as a host, but as a fellow scientist, a colleague who had also grown disillusioned with Project Chimera. She had been working with Vance, trying to gather evidence, to find a way to dismantle the project from within. She was trying to help me, to help the original Michael. She was in as much danger as I was, perhaps more. A sudden sharp clang from downstairs shattered the silence. The old floorboards creaked. They had found me. Ethel Lapse. They knew I was here. They had been watching, waiting. My heart pounded, not just from fear, but from a newfound resolve. I wasn't just fighting for my life. I was fighting for the life of the true Michael Sterling, for Jessica, for every innocent soul they had stolen. I had the truth, the evidence, but I was cornered. And I knew with chilling certainty that they wouldn't stop until they had silenced every trace of the truth and every fragment of the original Michael forever. The metallic screech of a forced lock echoed through the silence of the safe house, a sound so visceral it vibrated in my bones. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, thudded on the floorboards above, then descended the creaking stairs. Dr. Elias Vance. I could feel his presence, a cold, calculating aura preceding him like a shadow. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs, but a strange calm settled over me. This was it, the final act. I clutched the small, custom-built device in my hand. It was my last gamble, a digital deadman switch I had painstakingly configured in the stolen hours of the night. It wasn't just a data dump. It was a live broadcast, designed to bypass every firewall, every corporate choke point, and scream the truth directly into the global consciousness. It was a desperate measure, activated by a single touch, or by the cessation of my own vital signs. I preferred the former. I wanted to be the one to light the fuse. The door to the hidden room burst open, splintering wood flying inward. Vance stood there, framed by the harsh glare of a tactical flashlight, flanked by two hulking figures in black. His face was a mask of grim satisfaction, a predator finally cornering its prey. "Michael," he said, his voice a low, chilling purr. Or should I say, Project Chimera, Subject Alpha 7? He took a step forward, his eyes gleaming with a triumph that turned my stomach. "You've been resourceful, I'll give you that. But all games must end." I didn't flinch. I just held his gaze, my thumb hovering over the activation button. "The game isn't over, Dr. Vance," I retorted, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "It's just beginning for you." He scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. "Foolish. You think you can outweed us? We control the narrative. We control the information. Any truth you attempt to disseminate will be buried, discredited. A conspiracy theory for the fringes." "Not this time," I said, and with a surge of adrenaline I pressed the button. A tiny, almost imperceptible red light flickered on the device. A silent signal traveling faster than light, igniting a firestorm across the digital ether. Vance's eyes narrowed. He must have recognized the device, or at least the implications of my defiant act. "What did you do?" he demanded, his composure cracking slightly. "I told the world your story, Elias," I said, a grim smile touching my lips. "Every sordid detail, every stolen memory, every innocent life you sacrificed on the altar of your twisted ambition. It's live, Dr. Vance. Unfiltered. Unstoppable." A wave of panic flickered across his face, quickly replaced by a furious resolve. "Get him!" he barked at his men. They lunged, but it was too late. The signal was out. My story, Michael's story, was no longer just mine. It was public domain. As the men closed in, I spoke directly to Vance, my voice imbued with a newfound strength. You thought you could erase Michael, but you only amplified him. You thought you could control consciousness, but you only proved its resilience. I am not Michael, not entirely, but I carry his essence, his memories, his stolen future. And now the world will know what you did to him. Just as they reached me, a cacophony erupted outside. Sirens. Multiple piercing sirens. Police, federal agents, they were here. My contingency, the anonymous tip sent hours ago to a trusted, independent journalist with a reputation for integrity, had paid off. They had been waiting for the signal, for the undeniable proof that something monumental was about to break. Chaos erupted inside the safe house. Vance's men, caught off guard, exchanged fire with the incoming authorities. Vance himself, his face a mask of disbelief and rage, made a desperate lunge for me, not to silence me, but to seize the device, to somehow claw back control. But he was too slow. A blur of movement, and a federal agent tackled him to the ground, pinning him as he struggled, screaming obscenities about ignorance and the greater good. I was pulled away, my device gently confiscated, my hands secured, but not with handcuffs. It was a protective measure, an acknowledgement that I was not a suspect but something else entirely. A witness. A victim. A living, breathing piece of evidence. Outside, the night air was thick with flashing lights and the shouts of officers. News vans, alerted by the same journalist, were already converging, their powerful spotlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating the scene of the downfall of Project Chimera. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Interrogations, medical examinations, psychological evaluations. It was exhaustive, invasive, but necessary. The digital evidence I had broadcast, combined with my detailed testimony and the physical evidence found in Vance's hidden labs, painted an undeniable picture. The world reacted with a mixture of horror, fascination, and outrage. Project Chimera became a global headline, a chilling cautionary tale of scientific hubris and the dark side of ambition. Dr. Elias Vance and his entire organization were exposed. The extent of their operations, the numerous subjects whose minds and memories had been manipulated, the ethical breaches that defied imagination, it all came crashing down. Vance himself, stripped of his power and prestige, was a broken man, yet he still clung to his delusion, muttering about saving humanity from itself, about the necessary sacrifices for evolution. His trial was a spectacle, a landmark case that pushed the boundaries of legal and ethical debate. And me? I was no longer just Michael. The media dubbed me the Echo, the memory weaver, the man who wasn't there. My face was everywhere, a symbol of the profound questions raised by Vance's work. Who was I truly? The memories were undeniably mine, or at least they were in me. Every laugh, every tear, every shared moment with David and Emily, every childhood dream of the original Michael. They were all vivid, tangible parts of my consciousness. But the origin, the spark of life that had first experienced them, was not me. The original Michael's parents, devastated but finally given answers, reached out. Meeting them was perhaps the hardest part. To see their grief, to feel their son's memories resonate within me as I looked into their eyes, was an experience that defied description. I could tell them what Michael felt, what he thought, what his last moments were like. I could give them a closure they never thought possible, a final, heartbreaking connection to the son they lost. But I could also never truly be him. My life became a complex tapestry of public scrutiny and profound introspection. I was a living testament to the fragility of identity, the power of memory, and the terrifying potential of science unbound by ethics. Therapists, philosophers, neuroscientists, they all sought answers from me, wanting to understand the unique landscape of my mind. I never fully resolved the question of who I was. Was I Michael, reborn through a technological nightmare? Or was I a new entity, forged from the fragments of another's life, carrying a burden of experience that wasn't originally my own? The truth was I was both and neither. I was a paradox, a living echo. But one thing was clear. I had given the original Michael a voice. I had honored his stolen life by exposing the truth. His memory, once a terrifying invasion, had become a sacred trust. It wasn't just a memory that wasn't mine. It was the memory that allowed me to find my own purpose. I learned to live with the duality, with the constant hum of another person's past within my present. It was a heavy burden, but also a profound gift. It taught me the invaluable lesson that identity isn't just about what you were born with, but what you choose to do with the life you're given, even if that life is built on the foundations of another. The world grappled with the implications of Project Chimera for years. New laws were enacted, ethical guidelines tightened, and the very definition of consciousness was debated in academic halls and kitchen tables alike. The chilling thought remained. If it happened once, could it happen again? The answer, a silent whisper in the back of my mind, was always yes. The pursuit of knowledge unchecked by a moral compass always risks creating monsters. And so I lived a walking testament to a stolen soul, a stark reminder of the memory that wasn't mine, but which ultimately became the very thing that defined who I was. I was the guardian of a truth too profound to be forgotten, a sentinel against the darkness that lurked in the shadows of scientific ambition, forever carrying the echo of a life that was, and a life that became. The memory that wasn't mine had become my legacy, a haunting melody playing on the strings of a borrowed soul, forever reminding humanity of the sacred, untouchable nature of the self.